Many thanks, Musbao, for the background report. Joining us now for the conversation is Ambassador Abdel Fattah Musa, Commissioner, Political Affairs, Peace and Security, ECOWAS. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria, Ambassador.
No, thank you very much.
He's
Thanks for
becoming
having
quite
me.
a regular on Good Morning Nigeria.
Of course.
Yes.
Also with us here is Ambassador Dauda Danladi, the former Nigerian High Commissioner to Pakistan. Good to have you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much for having me.
Another regular, we also have joining us on the program Kopep Dabukat, analyst on African international affairs, especially on governance, democratization, peace and security issues. He's an expert on civil society engagement with intergovernmental organizations like ECOWAS, African Union, UN agencies, and pioneer coordinator of the CAADP Non-State Actors CNC, pioneer network coordinator of the West African Democracy, and he's also a Solidarity Network, General Secretary of the West African Civil Society Forum. That's quite a resume. Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. And we also have joining us from Owo, Ondo State, Achievers University, Professor Bola Akinterinwa. He's the former Director General, Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, NIIA. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being with you again.
We begin the conversation this morning. Over the weekend, the extraordinary summit took place, and it was quite a surprise for watchers of the situation as they rolled out with ECOWAS and Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and most people thought something will come out, and something good did come out. It was quite a surprise, but it caught a lot of people unawares. You know, after a very hard stance at the initial stage when the coup in Niger took place, now there are sanctions lifted, but with a little bit of conditions. Why the backslide on the stance taken by ECOWAS?
Yeah, I don't think it's a backslide.
Okay.
You know, that ECOWAS, you know, the decision that were taken on Saturday. One, we impose sanctions to elicit compliance by the authorities in Niger, you know, of our protocols and others. That was the intention. And after careful analysis over the months, we've seen that the sanctions have had an unintended consequence on the livelihoods of the population, you know, in this country. You know, so at least ECOWAS is there for the people, you know, right? And it is not, you know, there for like the heads of state or anything like that. So it was very important to review, you know, the sanctions regime. If you remember, right from the beginning, ECOWAS even put the military option on the table.
Yes.
That has gone to the back burner. And then we've reviewed also the economic and financial, you know, sanctions, particularly the border closure and the commercial sanctions, which are actually sanctions on a bilateral basis, right? Like for Nigeria cutting off electricity supply, you know, to Niger. It's not an ECOWAS sanction. But since all member states were supposed to introduce measures to elicit compliance from the junta, you know, like we virtually hit Niger with the kitchen sink, right? Right from the beginning,
Yeah,
as
right
they
from the
say.
beginning, yeah.
Yeah, and of course there are, you know, unintended consequences on it, and also a lot of misinformation with it. Number one, ECOWAS never imposed sanctions on items of humanitarian value, food, medicines, and others.
There was never a sanction on
They
that.
were never sanctioned. Okay. And at a time, it was actually the regime in Niger that refused to allow vehicles, even with humanitarian, you know, goods to enter the country. At times fearing that probably, you know, such movement would be used as a Trojan horse to attack them. But they were giving that impression that children were left without medicines, water, treatment and all that. So it became, something like an albatross on the neck of ECOWAS, and it is very important to get the people on board. And so that is why these sanctions, particularly financial, economic, sanctions, and then particularly the border closure, the airspace and all that, we remove them. But the political sanctions remain.
Okay.
All right.
That is it.
Okay. Thank you, Ambassador Musa. You say that the sanctions, some of the sanctions were lifted because of the consequences on the people. If that is true, why did ECOWAS wait for these countries to come out, to say they are leaving ECOWAS, to come out with this new, if you like, why did ECOWAS wait before lifting the sanctions? Because, I mean, people have been suffering since the sanctions were imposed. Okay, now they want to leave ECOWAS, and ECOWAS is now, trying to hand the carrot to them. Why did ECOWAS wait? Okay,
you have to separate the two things, right? ECOWAS does not have any wide-ranging sanctions against Mali. ECOWAS does not have any wide-ranging sanctions against Burkina Faso. Okay, so the three of them have come together with probably the support of new partners like Russia and other things, and they think they can survive with that, and say they are withdrawing. ECOWAS, says that these three countries are important member states. The sheer landmass of the three countries dwarfs all the landmass of the coastal countries, in ECOWAS, right? Even though they contribute just about maybe less than 15% of the GDP of the region. Okay, and the population-wise, it's not a very significant area, also. But we need them. Numbers give strength to ECOWAS, whether at the international fora like the United Nations Security Council or the Peace and Security Council. So we felt that the regional integration will not be the same without these three countries.
So what you're saying, in other words, if they didn't say they were pulling out of ECOWAS, ECOWAS may not have, gone back on the earlier sanctions imposed on them?
Can you come again?
My point is, if they didn't come out, you are saying they're important to ECOWAS.
Yes.
So if they didn't come out to say they were leaving ECOWAS, would ECOWAS have, gone back on the sanctions and try to make it a little bit lighter?
This is what I'm saying. We went back on sanctions specifically with regard to Niger. If you read the whole communique, almost all the sanctions that have been lifted were sanctions on Niger. And if you want to look very carefully, those the withdrawal from ECOWAS is not led by Niger, it's mainly led by Mali, and others. So these are, I think, even though they are related, they are two separate issues altogether. The heads of state, decided, even in fact in their own consultations on the margins of the just ended AU summit in Addis Ababa, to hold this thing because Lent is on us, the holy month of Ramadan. It's just about a week or so away, and it is very important to think about the plight of the people. There have been so many appeals, to ECOWAS from the ulamas, from civil society organizations, from various quarters, for ECOWAS to look at these sanctions and then try to make sure that the population does not suffer unduly from the activities of the military, in their country. And this is the culmination of, an assessment of all these appeals, and also a study of the impact, of it. Yeah, but as you heard earlier on, these countries withdrawing, they are going to be the biggest losers if they leave ECOWAS. Already, ECOWAS banks, the ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development, has projects in the three countries totaling about 300 million. The BOAD, that's the Francophone Central Bank, has also got a similar portfolio in all these countries, and they are going to lose all that. They've got about 130 citizens of their countries who are working in ECOWAS institutions. And ECOWAS employs only citizens from the ECOWAS states. So they would have to go back, with all the problem. There are about 5 million people from Burkina Faso in Cote d'Ivoire alone. Cote d'Ivoire. And if they lose free movement, it means they would have to go for visas to visit these countries. They cannot settle, they cannot open businesses, except under the laws of the country. So there are so many benefits. And then we've got about 7 ECOWAS institutions in these 3 countries, which employ, citizens over there. We have to shut them down. So we are just appealing to them to have a very careful look, at the decision, which in our mind was made very hastily, for them to think about the consequences of these actions. So we are just, we are saying our doors are open. We are continuing with negotiations with them.
Yeah.
Many other elder statesmen and others are speaking to them. And we hope that at the end of the day, reason, will emerge, and then they will rescind their decision. So ECOWAS is not antagonistic toward them. We removed almost all sanctions on Mali, almost all sanctions on Burkina Faso. It was only Niger, and it is simply because Niger had not agreed to a transition timetable in their country, and we're waiting for them to agree. Then progressively we lift those sanctions.
But have the other states agreed to transition to democracy?
Yes, they have. Even though
what's the time frame?
All the 2 countries are supposed to return to constitutional order this year, in 2024. But from analysis, it is not very likely that they will be able to do it. Burkina Faso is already saying that with insecurity in the country, they don't think elections are a priority for them. But that is where the irony comes. Okay, because they overthrew a civilian regime, blaming it for insecurity. Okay, and now, when the civilian regime was there, only 30% of the territory was outside state control. Today, more than 60% of the country is outside state control. So what's the justification for the coup? Okay, and now they are giving the same insecurity as a reason for not returning the country to constitutional order. So there's a lot of contradiction in the behavior of the regimes, but this is not where we are going. They are supposed to hand over, and we are going to continue working with them. The nominal sanctions on all 3 countries remain. That is, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger cannot take part in decision-making instances of ECOWAS. African Union has also suspended them.
They are only part of a technical discussion, you said?
Technical meetings, yes, particularly on security. Because we cannot, give somebody a haircut in their absence, right? Terrorism is concentrated in that area. There is no way we are going to fight terrorism without them. So meetings like that, we are inviting them, but decision making, they are out.
Exempted. All right, Ambassador Musa,
until they return to democracy, that's it.
Yes, until they, they restore constitutional order. They will not take part in ECOWAS statutory meetings, decision making like mediation and Security Council. The same thing at the AU.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Musa. Of course, we'll get back to you. Ambassador Danladi, I'd like to get your views. We've gotten the details from Ambassador Musa, what ECOWAS is trying to do. But I want to find out from you, is this a sign of weakness on the part of ECOWAS?
Well,
or you think it's the right step?
I think I would start by actually commending the chairman of ECOWAS, President Asuwaji Bola Ahmed Tinubu, for deploying diplomatic dexterity to get ECOWAS out of the political conundrum that ECOWAS finds itself, following the appeals made by an elder statesman, General Yakubu Gawan, as well as who is one of the founding fathers of ECOWAS, as well as other faith-based organizations and traditional institution and civil society organization, as mentioned by His Excellency. But let's look at it in another perspective. You see, what is the objective of ECOWAS? ECOWAS was primarily set up to promote cooperation, economic cooperation among member states, to raise the living standard of the citizens of that country, to provide sustainable development. And I think we have to give kudos to ECOWAS, because over the past 49 years, I think ECOWAS has been able, looking at the figures of 2022, the trading within the ECOWAS countries, based on the liberalization, free movement of goods and services, has hit about $77 million. Now, trading of ECOWAS with the rest part of the world, it was quite amazing looking at the data. It's about over 277 billion US dollars. That is a veritable platform that can provide leverage to African countries, to the countries in ECOWAS, whenever they are negotiating favorable trade deals. If you look at the GDP of ECOWAS, you are looking at a GDP of over 700 billion US dollars, which is one of the pillars for the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. The success of that depends to a large extent on the capacity of the regions to bolster the trade. Now, narrowing it down to the olive branch that has now been extended by ECOWAS, I think they should be reasonable to take this olive branch, because, as he has mentioned these three countries have been benefiting from several projects of ECOWAS. If you talk about food security, it's surprising that these three countries hold about over 50% of the strategic grain reserve of ECOWAS. And they are benefiting from the World Bank resilience funds of about over $230 million. If you talk about the issue of livestock, for example, within the ECOWAS region, you know, some time ago, the ECOWAS Supreme Court passed a judgment that there should be free movement of livestock within the ECOWAS region. And you know the problems, the attendant problems that comes with livestock, especially in Nigeria, the farmers herders clash. Anyway, the World Bank came up with another package, I think over $200 million, to support pastoralism within the ECOWAS region. And these countries are beneficiaries. If you go a little bit forward, when they accuse ECOWAS of being pay lip service to fighting security in the Sahel, I think ECOWAS came up with a framework, a security framework, and that security framework, it was supported with about $100 million, and at the same time, these three countries benefited directly. They got about $7 million to provide logistic support to their armed forces in order to combat the fight against terrorism. All right? Now, if you go a little bit further, you see that these countries have challenges of desertification. So the issue of famine.
Climate change.
Climate change has been a problem in these countries. And ECOWAS came up with a strategic plan. And that's, hold on just a minute. With a strategic plan, that is the irrigation plan. And it has provided a lot of funds. As the president of the commission said, that they will be losing out the 500 million package funding several projects, apart from the exposure they have from the ECOWAS Bank. So what I'm saying is that I think they should take the olive branch. They should participate.
If you think these countries have benefited so much from ECOWAS, why do you think they intend to exit ECOWAS?
Of course, there are external pressures, all right? The anti-West sentiments. You see, within the wider context, you remember the Ukraine-Russia war. You remember the war of nerves between Russia and the West. Macron, the president of France, had an altercation with President Putin, where Putin said, look, I may not fight you directly, but then covertly, you will see. And it's not surprising that the Francophone countries have bolted out, they have truncated their constitutional government, they have sacked France.
Yes.
France has lost out, all right? And Russia has established its presence right now in these countries. In Burkina Faso, they have over 200 what they call the African Corps to support and provide security in Burkina Faso. You go to Niger, it's something. The Wagner Group has now been transformed into the African Corps, of course, with vested interest in the mineral deposits in these countries. The uranium, the gold, the iron, the bauxite, the manganese. These countries are rich with natural resources. It's only the people that are poor. So it is a vested interest. And this anti-West sentiment gave rise to this, the truncation of this constitutional order. And again, the issue of democracy. What is the definition of democracy? The wider definition is government of the people,
For the people.
for the people,
And by the people.
and by the people. So the absence of good governance, the absence of level playing field, building democratic institutions, the fight against corruption, all right?
Yes.
And a sense of belonging,
Yes.
an inclusive system.
Yes.
If it is absent, then of course these things are bound to happen, and of course Russia, within the wider context, has cashed in. And I will not be surprised if ECOWAS and AU do not arrest the situation in Senegal. It may join
Yes,
the Francophone countries.
Some experts are saying that it is sort of a return of the Cold War, and it's like it's now a system that Africa is now being recolonized, because these countries are saying they want to detangle themselves from the colonial administration. I don't like using the colonial master, people always use it's an administration. And let's bring in Mr. Dabukat into this conversation. The lifting of sanctions, they say, is a new push for dialogue. And experts also said that the planned exit of these countries from the regional bloc will undermine the regional integrity and integration process efforts of ECOWAS. This, especially with the African Free Trade Agreement, and that if allowed to happen, it will be a messy deal with a loss of more than $100 billion, dollars in the making. What is your reaction to the lifting of the sanctions, if not all? And what do you think will be the response? Because we have not had any response from these countries based on the lifting of the sanctions. What do you think their response will be?
Yeah, thank you very much. I will talk more from a practical angle, given that I am a representative of the civil society. I can assure you that what ECOWAS has done is exactly what we had requested in our letter to ECOWAS on the 7th of December last year, ahead of the summit. And so we are happy to see that ECOWAS has been able to do that. In fact, I can guarantee you that the news I received yesterday from people in Niger is that there was jubilation, particularly in the border towns, because that is like a dream come true for them, So this has laid a foundation for solid dialogue. And as the two ambassadors have mentioned, it is only, if you are on your path to destruction, that when you receive a very clear, positive advance, and then you don't respond. So we're waiting to see what response the military juntas will give to this. However, I would look at it also from both sides. Yeah. Of course, if these three countries had gone ahead, or will go ahead to continue their exit from ECOWAS, definitely they are in the losing side. Because population-wise, they are not up to, I would say 20%. The three countries they are not up to 20% of the population. They are not up to 10%. I think Ambassador was a bit conservative. They are about 10% of the economy of ECOWAS. And the populations of these countries are the ones with the lowest purchasing power in ECOWAS. So in reality, what they will lose will be great. I mean, the banks that operate across the West African region, I don't think any of them is actually originating from these countries. So even financial transactions are, they will lose from that. But as it has been pointed out, these countries might have been spurred by the international, pressure to say we're leaving. But at the same time, this is, I would see it also from the more positive side, that their announcement of exit was a negotiation move.
Okay.
So we are hoping to see a reversal of that. And really, for us, looking at this side of the ECOWAS, the one that remains within ECOWAS, I think it will also be at a disadvantage, because ECOWAS will now just be a thin strip of coastal, land. And we hear, I can't confirm that, but we hear that some other countries, coastal countries, were even moving to negotiate with these three countries to serve as their, trade corridor. So, I mean, it's a dangerous thing to have allowed to continue. And ECOWAS has actually taken the right move.
All right.
It's always better late than never.
Okay, better late than never. So it means that, in your view, it's actually late. But let's get the feel of Professor Akinteriwa in all this. Some people have said that maybe ECOWAS is not doing the needful in meeting its objectives for member countries. Some say that instead of ECOWAS to ensure that there's peace, the security, and that the tenets of democracy are enshrined in member states, ECOWAS sits back, relax, wait for insecurity to hit countries, democracy to go wrong, leaders to lead the people wrong, and then when there's a takeover, ECOWAS stands up to wield the big stick. Professor Akinteriwa, would you say that ECOWAS is doing the needful in terms of, ensuring that, member states, live up to expectation and that the region prospers?
That with the lifting of the conditional sanctions on Niger Republic, it can be rightly argued that, and I can borrow the words of Johnny Nash, who said that I can see clearly now that the rain is gone. There's no rain this time, but it is clear that for the first time in the conduct and management of this crisis, the ECOWAS Commission and the ECOWAS Authority are now beginning to see more clearly. Before the lifting of the sanctions, it appears to me that both the ECOWAS Commission and the ECOWAS Authority are both suffering from the virus of myopia. They think about taking sanctionary measures, but without factoring in the implications within and externally. They didn't. They simply just want to apply the principle of pacta sunt servanda, that is, sanctity of agreements. The mere fact that Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger had delegated part of their sovereignty to ECOWAS, considered a supranational authority. So in this case, the authority thought that Niger and the other two countries owed the ECOWAS organization a responsibility to respect the contractual obligations they had. This is most unfortunate, because the ECOWAS authority in this particular case has not factored in the likely implications at the international relations level. They've not looked at what, for instance, are you hearing me?
Go on.
Okay. They have not looked at the likely attitude of Morocco, of Algeria, two countries that are African in geopolitical definition, and both of which constitute, or belong to the Maghreb Union. Now, we need to get certain things right for reasons of psychology of human differences. I do not understand what the two ambassadors and even Mr. Dauda Danladi are saying. I don't share their sentiments. Most unfortunately, the second ambassador, I couldn't hear what he was trying to say. But I heard the first ambassador, Ambassador Fatau Abdul. He raised the issue of sanctions. He was giving the impression, if I heard him well, that it's only Niger that was targeted for sanctions, that Mali, Burkina Faso were not targeted. And even he was saying, he did say, not he was saying, he did say, I heard that one very well. He said that the people of Niger were never sanctioned, that is the regime. As an academic, my problem is to find out what is a sanction. Is sanction direct or indirect? I am perturbed by the fact that the ambassador is saying they only sanction the regime, the junta, but forgetting that the junta is standing in, representing, protecting the interests of the people. The ambassador forgot to tell us that the people of Niger came into the open to support the junta, the tyrannic junta. He didn't tell us that look, here I am saying that, first of all, they say this, the withdrawal of the three countries is dangerous. I cannot see why they should be arguing that it is dangerous. It's never dangerous. It's simply because the ambassador and all those that have spoken before me, consciously or otherwise, decided to forget the provisions of Article 1D and Article 1E of the 1991 Abuja Treaty, establishing, the African Economic Community. That particular treaty, the 1991 Abuja Treaty, is part and parcel of the constitutive act of the current African Union that replaced the OAU. And what did it say? Unlike and in reaction, in opposition to the definition of Africa as a region by the United Nations, Africa is a region. The United States considers Africa as a region. But for the purposes of continental integration, African leaders said, look, there's no way we can have constructive and meaningful development if, for instance, we do not divide Africa. Africa was now divided into 5 regions. 5 regions. West Africa, North Africa, Central Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa. The implication now, Article 1E now says any 3 countries within 1 region or more than 1 region coming together will constitute a sub-region, and it is encouraged. So what has happened at the level of the West African region is that you have Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, 3 Francophone countries now opting out. If they had come together to constitute their alliance of Sahel state without grievance, without animosity. It will be a different kettle of fish. But the 1991 Abuja Treaty favors, you know, the establishment of a sub-region in order to enhance regional integration. So in this case, when we are carrying out our analysis, for instance, there is the need, you know, to factor the positive aspects. The issue, the dynamics, the politics of the crisis is such that when Nigeria, in compliance with the ECOWAS directive, decided to cut off electricity supply to Niger, Algeria came out to say there's no big deal. We will give you, Niger people, electricity, and for that matter, gratis. Gratis. As of today now, what is happening, Morocco and Algeria are now issues concerning the Trans-Saharan and the Trans-Coastal Gas Project. What is happening? Because of the crisis in Niger, ECOWAS and Nigeria in particular, they are now saying that they will review the Trans-Saharan gas project passing through Niger Republic to Algeria. But it is not going to be so anymore. They are now looking at the coastal states. They are talking about trans-coastal states. So when you look at this, there are merits and demerits in all these discussions. As much as I want to agree with Ambassador Fattau and my brother colleague, the second ambassador who spoke, you see, the issue is that sanction can be intentional. But people believe that since it is not yet a fait accompli, it is not a sanction.
It seems that we sort of lost the Zoom network there. I'm sure he will come back to talk about more about the issues he has been raising, which are pertinent issues here. It's as if he's not in agreement with what ECOWAS did, and I can see you're itching to respond to what he has said. Let's get your response.
Yeah, no, that is true. I found it very difficult to follow the logic of the professor. You know, in the first place, he was either misquoting some of the things that were said, or and others. Let me, say one thing, answering your question, and yes, maybe that would also go there. That ECOWAS, when member states, okay, yes, ECOWAS Vision 2050, right, wants to shift ECOWAS from the ECOWAS of states to ECOWAS of the people. We have not arrived there yet. There's going to be, and the ECOWAS Commission is an executive wing of the authority. And we owe it to the leadership and pragmatism of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, that he has guided the community to these decisions that were taken last Saturday. That is one, side of it. If you see that ECOWAS is silent when things are happening, ECOWAS has been, for the latest development in Senegal, ECOWAS has been very active. On Saturday, the president of Senegal was attacking ECOWAS for the communique that we issued, beginning from the time, that everybody thought President Macky Sall was going to go for a third term in his country. I know mistakes could have been made in the past, but ECOWAS is not an activist organization. We do a lot of back channel diplomacy and then things like that. That is very important to note. Number two, if he is saying, that these coup d'etats are very popular, we are not oblivious of the fact that there is a lot of negative sentiment against certain foreign powers, in the Sahel in particular. And I have to mention a country like France, okay, which has become something like an enemy number one to majority of the population in the Francophone countries. But what I will tell you is that these military regimes are only keying into popular mood. They are not. You know, I mean, you cannot tell me that the president of the military regime in Niger, who has been a beneficiary of France Afrique since about 2010, you know, another thing, all of a sudden is now the champion of anti-French sentiments in the country. The people really are rising. And we shouldn't also forget one thing. We had the Cold War in Africa, where these superpowers used Africa as an arena. By then it was the Soviet Union and then the
USA.
collective West today.
Yes, today.
We are gradually returning to it. And then when the professor is talking about Algeria and Morocco are not friends. They are big rivals. And Morocco is taking advantage of the misery of Algeria, in Niger in particular, because if you remember, Algeria wanted to be a mediator, and that has fizzled out. Mali has come out with statements saying they are pulling out of the Algiers agreement, you know, between the Malian authorities and then the Tuareg rebellion in the country, right? So Morocco, being the key rival of Algeria, is taking advantage of it, saying that they will provide access to the sea to these landlocked countries. And it's very interesting geographically to think how these countries are going to go to Morocco, to the sea. How are they going to do it? Through Mauritania, go through Polisario territory, which is contested, to get to the coast. You know, right? These are desperate measures. What I will tell you is that the world has become very multipolar. And then the whole of the Sahel has become a contested zone. From the Middle Eastern countries, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, all of them are involved. Yes. You know, in that place. This is what I'll tell you. The traditional powers are also involved in it. And the African powers, the same. So we need to be very careful in trying to look at it so that we do not make Africa another arena for superpower,
Cold War, yes.
A new Cold War, you know, in Africa.
You know, the Maghreb states were part of the Cold War even then in the 50s and the 60s. They were used as a standing point there. You talked about ECOWAS, you know, moving from ECOWAS of state to ECOWAS of the people. But some experts have also said that, you know, while ECOWAS has not been able to achieve the aims and objectives of the setting up of ECOWAS itself, how can you now move to ECOWAS of the people? How can the people be involved in this movement from ECOWAS of state to ECOWAS of the people? What does it actually entail?
Yeah, I was listening to some of the leaders of the juntas in the countries, and they said their argument was that ECOWAS was created for economic integration. ECOWAS was not created to become political or in security, you know, which is also a very big contradiction, right? To ask them, you know, for example, yes, ECOWAS was created in 1975 by the Legal Treaty, you know, right? 75. The world was very different. So the argument is that when the Civil War began in 1989 in Liberia, because ECOWAS is an economic integration body, we should fold our arms. Sierra Leone came. And the current ECOWAS protocol emerged from the experiences of these wars in the region. So the organizations evolve with the evolution of the environment. And this is where ECOWAS is now. And all those countries have signed up to the Supplementary Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance. In fact, that's protocol that declares zero tolerance for power obtained or maintained by unconstitutional means. It came into effect in 2005 under the former president of Niger, who was then the chair of ECOWAS. So for them today to say that, democracy and, what have you, are not the objective of ECOWAS, it's just wrong. But we are moving the needle from ECOWAS of the people. We've got our brother here, who is the leader of WACSOF, right? WACSOF, its emergence was facilitated by ECOWAS to be a platform for broad civil society, not NGOs, broad civil society, women's organization, youth groups, the private sector, traditional groups, to lend their voice to the regional integration process. Okay. That has been a bit problematic, but today, just last Thursday and Friday, there was the meeting of civil society networks from across the region in Abuja here to establish ECOSOC, the Economic, Social and Cultural Council of ECOWAS, which is the platform for civil society engagement with member states. So this is where the movement is, coming.
All right, beautiful, okay. Beautiful movement. I will really want to see a difference and, of course, a change as far as the member states are concerned. Having to move to ECOWAS of the people. But as regards, the decisions reached by ECOWAS, now we are at the point where you have lifted some sanctions, and then one of the conditions given is that. Former President Mohamed Bazoum should be released, and you've also asked Niger to come up with an acceptable transition timetable. Now, if that is not done, what would ECOWAS do?
No, so I wonder what you expect ECOWAS to do. A president, democratically elected, has been overthrown, and to be very honest with you, Niger was the best performing country among the Sahelian countries, whether in the fight against terrorism or in terms of child education and other things. That was a major program in a very conservative society, Muslim, where the rights of girls, women is not at that level, all throughout, right? They have done all that, and you overthrow him. The only logical thing ECOWAS can do is to ask for his release. From detention. They've not charged him, with any, crime.
So my question is, if he's not released, as you have directed, what happens?
Yes. No. Well, this is what we are saying, that he should be released. There should be a transitional timetable. It is going to form the basis of further negotiations with the country. You see, we are mixing two things here. There is the summit dealt with two somehow interrelated but very different issues. One is the exit of the three countries from ECOWAS. The other is the situation in Niger, itself. Yeah. These were the two main items on the agenda of the ECOWAS authority. The other two countries have got transitional arrangements agreed with ECOWAS, and that is fundamental to the protocols that they have all signed up to, the Supplementary Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance, and then the ECOWAS mechanism. They have. Niger, up till today, has not agreed to any transition yet.
But what difference does the transition timetable actually make? Looking at the other countries that already have transition timetables, but they are yet to move. They are yet to, move further, have elections, and then have a democratically elected government. So, I mean, what difference would that make?
It makes a lot of difference. It is a mechanism through which there will be structured engagement with the country. We are already talking with Guinea. Incidentally, nobody is mentioning Guinea. Guinea is very much on track, to say that they are moving towards restoration of constitutional order. Mali, has made a lot of progress. Mali has set up a unique electoral management body. They have adopted a new constitution, which were all part and parcel of the transition framework, right? They claim that there are technical hitches. That's why they are delaying the election. They have not said they are abandoning the election. And that is already a very positive move. The same thing with Burkina Faso. They say insecurity is the main issue preventing them from going. ECOWAS says we are setting up the standby force. We have already, like Ambassador said, we've given the 3 countries up to almost $8 million to buy equipment in the counter-terrorism fight. ECOWAS is setting up the counter-terrorism force to help, this same country. So if you say insecurity is the problem, then the moment we are able to help reduce insecurity, you have no reason to say you are not going to go to election. So the important point here is this: none of the other 3 countries in transition have said they won't go for elections. They have not.
Okay.
They are raising a lot of issues, and we are engaging them to resolve those issues so that we have elections. Niger has not made one step forward. The release of Bazoum and setting up of a transitional framework.
Okay.
These are cardinal principles of ECOWAS. Without that, ECOWAS can never remove the political sanctions that have been imposed on the country. So this is it. If we lose that, then what is it? You want the whole region, if we reward the military for taking over power, tomorrow there's going to be a coup d'etat in another country.
Yes, it should be.
Very soon, that's what's going to happen. And those who lived in the 70s, 80s, and the early 90s know the balance sheet of military regimes in this continent. And that is why the ECOWAS heads of state, in their wisdom, said that zero tolerance to military coups. And we are insisting on that, and that's what is going to happen. And we know that in all the 3 countries, human rights is suffering. We have got a lot of complaints from unions, the Lawyers Association, Bar Association in Niger, on my desk right now, complaining about the restricted political space,
yes,
arrests of people.
Usually under a military regime, things like this happen.
That is it.
Yes,
so
but
sooner or
really,
later, this is what I'm saying, any military regime will be found out. That is it. Today there is euphoria. And it is also very important for us to realize that the young people who are jumping in the streets supporting the military juntas, right? They are just one generation old. They were born after, after the end of the Cold War.
Yeah, the Cold War.
And
most of them don't even know the Cold War took place.
Never experienced military coup.
Exactly.
But some people would argue with
We
you,
have to go.
Ambassador.
We,
Yes,
we
have
have
to
to go
take
on a break
They
right
will.
now.
But
Yes.
yeah, some people would
Yes.
argue with you about, this balance sheets of the military.
Welcome back to Good Morning Nigeria. We've been discussing the outcome of the ECOWAS extraordinary meeting which took place over the weekend. And we have a panel of guests who have been talking and contributing to the conversation. Ambassador Nladi, I'm coming to you. Let's talk about the interconnectivity of these countries, in the fight against terrorism, political instability, drugs, human trafficking, and that continue to hinder the progress of ECOWAS itself. With this, with what is happening now, with the sanctions being lifted but not all, how can we bring those countries back to the table so that we can be able to fight these challenges that ECOWAS continues to face, so that we can have, the objectives of ECOWAS fully implemented in the region? And secondly, how will this affect the free trade agreement? Because it's just in limbo. It has not gone off the ground up till now. We're just talking about it all the time, but we've not felt the impact of the free trade agreement. How will this impact it, since we've not had any response from these states already?
Yeah, these are very pertinent questions that you have raised, and going forward, ECOWAS, when it comes to the issue of fighting or combating terrorism, violent extremism, and of course organized crime, I think to a large extent ECOWAS has done well. The setting up of the multinational task force, joint task force, was a move in the right direction. It has made some of the ECOWAS countries to pull in their assets. You see, just one country, Niger. It has a borderline of about 1,600 kilometers with Nigeria, just Niger. And to police that is not easy. And if these countries are allowed to exit, what means that shared intelligence, pooling of assets will not be there. And that would give the platform for increased smuggling, human trafficking, drug peddling, and of course, all the other security challenges. But I think the bold step has been taken by ECOWAS. You see, I think ECOWAS was formed based on shared history, culture, and values. And I think if some members become recalcitrant, which is normal as a family, yes, they have been called to the order, and I am sure that they will attend the next technical meeting, and going forward, negotiations will be made, and I think some of these issues will be resolved so that we can come back again, re-strategize, and see how we can combat the challenges facing the ECOWAS region. But let me go forward a little bit to say that how do we strengthen ECOWAS so that ECOWAS can have the tools to ensure good governance within the ECOWAS region? I think one basically is that member states should be able to really fund ECOWAS so that ECOWAS will have the necessary tools, all right? Secondly, respecting and implementing the protocols that have been signed in place. Like, for example, the good governance protocol. I wonder if ECOWAS has this mechanism, borrow this mechanism, African peer review mechanism, so that it is in place and entrenched in ECOWAS to monitor governance in some of member states' countries, to call their colleagues to order where they are deviating, to at least ensure that elections are conducted free and fair. This issue of imposing candidates, imposing or changing the timetable of election in the middle of the game, I think ECOWAS should be in a position to hold such undemocratic move. Because you see, military coups or unconstitutional change of government is not only exclusive preserve of the military. You also have unconstitutional change of government within the civilian sector, where a president wants to extend his tenure, or changing the goalposts. Thank God that with the pronouncement of ECOWAS, country like Senegal, I think I had the president coming out to say that, look, I will leave once my mandate expires. But you are going to leave when your mandate expires. What has been put in place for a succession? April is when the mandate of the Senegal president will expire. Is there a timetable to fill in the vacuum? If there is none, then I think ECOWAS has a challenge in that direction. I think going forward, I want to see an integration of ECOWAS with the African Union and other regions within the African continent, so that there will be a synergy in promoting real good governance and democracy in Africa. I think this issue of just head of states coming on peer group, voluntary monitoring, I think it is not enough. I think there should be a mechanism that will compel monitoring of democratic governance in not only ECOWAS region, but in the African continent, so that we can have a sustainable democracy in Africa.
Well, many thanks, Ambassador Danladi. You have made a very important point, and your response to the initial question about the exit of the countries, from what you have said, it's not just going to affect the three countries, it will affect other member states of ECOWAS, and maybe that's why ECOWAS is shifting grounds. But I'd like to get to Mr. Dabugat now. You know, I tried to ask Ambassador Musa earlier about you know, the transition timetable and what impact that would make, considering the fact that, say, Guinea, for example, Guinea, another member state of ECOWAS, has been under military rule since September 2021. Yet, I mean, there's no election yet, and they have not returned to democratically elected government. away from sanctions now, what do you think ECOWAS can do? Because, I mean, the list of countries that have transition timetable in place with no elections is growing by the day. Niger may add to that. I mean, what should ECOWAS do to ensure that we have, democratically elected governments back in these states?
Thank you. I think, first of all, ECOWAS is doing what it should do according to its statutes. However, ECOWAS can do more. And I'm happy Ambassador is here. For us, from the civil society angle, we think that there is a need to have a genuine conversation about democracy, in West Africa. What really does it mean? Because we've been seeing a lot of, unconstitutional or impunitus actions, so to say, by different governments across the country, across the region. And they are supposed to be democratic. And they are the ones taking decisions on behalf of ECOWAS. We've seen, for example, in December, the disbanding of the parliament in Guinea-Bissau. We've seen also this recent event in Senegal, and we've seen different laws that gag the media, that gag freedom of information, freedom of expression in different countries. Basically a closing of the civic space across the region, and it's a global thing anyway. But for West Africa, there is a code. There is the ECOWAS a supplementary protocol on democracy and good governance. And there are a lot of its provisions that so far they seem to be difficult to implement, so to say. Issues of term limits, we've highlighted that as civil society. We've been talking about this for over 10 years. Issues of electoral sanctity. We've seen how a lot of elections last year have been challenged in court. And yes, there are a lot of issues that can be looked, that can be drawn from those elections. A lot of real issues. How are we working to improve elections? We've also seen issues of human rights abuses across, the region. So, is it democracy simply because a club of heads of states can actually find their way to the seat, or is it democracy that is anchored in the interests of the people? So that is one aspect. The second aspect is, I think also an ambassador started talking about it, the meeting that ECOWAS had last week towards the formulation of an ECOSOC West Africa. For us in civil society, we want to see that process of formulation of an ECOSOC being, a deeply consultative process that involves everybody in the society. That is a very powerful tool that ECOWAS can even use to engage directly with citizens in the countries. Because, and the power of the citizen, you cannot beat it. If the citizens move as one, they can even depose the government in the country, So if ECOWAS is having such a consultative process, it should be as comprehensive as possible. It should be as well-intentioned as possible, so that all elements of the society should be brought on board, and a consultative, strategy should be carried out where these people's interests, can be pulled into the policy process. This conversation has only started. It is a very long way to go. But at least putting this on the table, and we've put it on the table already to Ambassador's office, to see to this. So these two issues are very critical for ECOWAS going forward, because the sanctions that were applied, as I said earlier, those were the main reasons that these countries have pulled out. So I don't see any reason why they will not come back,
to the table.
But we've seen that due to the sanctions, citizens have come out to express their displeasure, come out to support the governments that we do not want to see there. All of us want to see democracy.
Yes.
So, yeah, please.
You talked about genuine conversation, and I know that here in Nigeria, the civil society has been like a thorn in the neck of politicians. We've seen during elections, the civil society comes out, to raise the voice, like something that happened in Kogi, that there was a turnaround during the Kogi election. But what I want to understand is, do governments take the opinion of the civil society seriously?
Well, that is an age-old question, because from the angle of the civil society, we realize that our bane is to continue to fight, with government, fight with public authorities to make sure that they hear us, not even to do what we ask them to do, but to just listen, sit down and listen to us. We have to keep drumming it, We think that governments can actually move in better stead if they are able to listen to what the civil society is saying. What is civil society? Civil society is when 1, 2, 3 interests, 1, 2, 3 citizens come together to pursue an interest that have to do with public good, And of course, civil society will not just come out here and talk, except there is something genuine to address, something genuine that affects the citizens.
Okay.
So we are representatives of the citizens, and as representatives of the citizens, we definitely want government to create that space, for us to engage, for us to bring in what the citizens are saying from the ground, and the more the spaces, the better they are, because we have different kinds of approaches, to different issues. So, yes
and no.
and no. There are different governments across the world have evolved different mechanisms to engage, civil society.
Okay.
For example, in the Moldovan parliament, for example, there is a process whereby even if a law is being passed, there is a stage at which it must be exposed to the civil society to give their view. I think such kinds of mechanisms.
In West Africa, has that?
No,
Moldova.
I'm
asking, but you have given Moldova. In West Africa, what's the
No,
case?
Unfortunately, in West Africa, we've not had that.
All right.
So the fight continues.
Ambassador, I'd like to quickly get to you because of time. Quickly, some people have said that with the lifting of sanctions, some people have said that ECOWAS, can no longer bite, but can only back.
But they brought out their fangs. The fangs came out.
I want to find out from you, because now it looks like sanctions may no longer work going forward. Yes. What does ECOWAS intend to, use, going forward, just so that...
Listen, ECOWAS will never win, all right, in this debate. Whatever we do, one side of society will say this and that, right? When ECOWAS was standing firm, we had all these appeals. Lift the sanction, lift the sanction. If ECOWAS does not listen, they will say, look, they are tone deaf. Okay? Now we have listened, and they say, oh, ECOWAS is weak. Okay, so we are caught in the middle.
Between.
But one thing I will tell you, and I just want to support what the colleagues here from civil society and Ambassador have said about democracy. We shouldn't forget that in the U.S., right, when the democracy started, after the Civil War and other things, 17 something,
yes.
Right, up till now, the president who lost elections about 3-4 years ago is still refusing to accept the results.
Yes, and it's still going to contest again.
Right. So the liberal democracy, as it is being practiced in Africa today, is just about 30 years old. 30. And within that, before 1990, there was only one alternation of power in Madagascar where a sitting president was defeated in elections. One. Since 1990, there have been 31. Okay, in Africa. Nigeria is no example, no exemption. We had the situation of President Jonathan,
Yes.
who conceded. We have the situation of Liberia with George Weah.
Yes.
You see, so people look at the negatives and they don't see the strides that the region has made in the past 30 years, right? There are so many former heads of state today in our communities. In the past, before 1990, they were either in exile, they were either in the cemetery, or they were in jail. Today, they live and they contribute to society as elder statesmen. President Yakubu Gowon, who has been very critical in where ECOWAS is today with his open letter about what is happening.
He's a founding member, so he's concerned.
What is happening. But we are seeing that the glass is only half full when it comes to democracy. At least there is a level of rule of law, human rights, and other things that is tangible in it. But liberal democracy in Africa is not producing the development dividends.
All right.
Right?
Okay.
And, this is what I'm, saying, and it is important. And representation, we talked about civil society. Our winner-take-all electoral system, we are looking at it very critically, that where one party wins about 49% of the vote in a country, and they are excluded from governance processes for that term, 4 years. And then the one who wins with 51, rules. So one half of the society is out of governance.
Is excluded from governance.
Yes, and that is why governance has become so violent, isn't it? Because it is do or die. Because if you don't win, you are out of the picture. And this is what we want to correct by bringing in that kind of proportional representation, civil society input in it. We have that working in many places where we have to look at the way democracy, runs, how political parties are organized.
Thank you so much. Of course, I can't let this conversation end without asking this question. I asked Mr. Dabgwe the last time we had a conversation with ECOWAS, and I'm going to ask Ambassador Adaladi now. Do you think that ECOWAS has outlived its relevance and importance?
Outlived its relevance?
Yes.
No. I think ECOWAS is working stronger despite the various daunting challenges. The only thing I would like to quickly say is that ECOWAS should be mindful of the new push for a multipolar world order by Russia. They must be mindful of that, and at the same time they must be mindful of the new scramble for Africa, so that we do not allow ourselves to be exploited once again.
Recolonization.
Yes.
Beautiful point.
Let's have your final thoughts in 30 seconds.
I would say some of the countries are technically under colonialism still, with the France signing the pact for the continuation of colonialism, which is still in effect in some of the French countries. So for me, I think this conversation will continue, but already a lot of people are seeing the conversation between ECOWAS and these three countries as a conversation between, a proxy party and revolutionaries.
Yes.
But I mean, the conversation is about democracy, which people have endorsed, which our people in ECOWAS, so to say, have endorsed and want to see.
Are we saying a re-emergence of the Marxist followers?
No, not really. I'm not a Marxist. I'm a pragmatist. I'm not a Marxist, but I want to see society move. The African society, by history, is actually not a Marxist society. It's not a socialist society.
We'll see the Russia coming in.
But we need to see how the people benefit.
Okay.
That's the objective.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Kopeb Dabugat, analyst on African international affairs, we thank you so much for coming on Good Morning Nigeria this morning. It's been a pleasure having you in the conversation. Ambassador Daudat Danladi, former Nigerian High Commissioner to Pakistan, as always, It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Ambassador Abdel Fattah Musa, Commissioner, Political Affairs, Peace and Security, ECOWAS. You know, like everybody says, a continuing conversation here, and I'm sure that they will be able to come back to the table and negotiations will continue.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming.
And
I was, we appreciate Professor Bola Akinteriwa, former Director General, Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. We sort of lost the Zoom connection there, but he actually made his point that pushed this conversation into another avenue, actually. So, gentlemen, we thank you so much for coming on Good Morning Nigeria. It's been a pleasure having you. And that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. Thanks so much for joining us. I am Jummai Yusuf.
And I'm Ian Ray John. Please remain tuned to the NTA.